Today is Martin Luther King Day, and Joe Biden was at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. This was, by the way, the church that was pastored by King himself. And Biden delivers a speech that was titled A Time for Choosing. Now, let's see what we're choosing about. Quote, "Are we a people who choose democracy over autocracy? You couldn't ask that question 15 years ago, right? You would have thought democracy was settled, not for African Americans, but democracy as an institutional structure was settled. But it's not. It's not." This is Biden. So what is Biden saying here? What he's saying here is that in King's time, the issue was whether or not rights, including the right to vote, obviously the right to engage in, to be paid for your labor, to engage in economic transactions, and the right to be able to go to schools and take advantage of public facilities, the same as everyone else. This right was established in principle, but the franchise had to be extended to African Americans. But Biden is saying now it's not like that. Now democracy itself is on the ballot. So you have one party, the Democrats, telling us that voting for that party is the only way to protect democracy, and that voting for the other party is undermining democracy. Now, what does it mean when someone says that? What does it mean for a party to tell you, you have to vote for us? That's how you save democracy. If you vote for the other party, you're against democracy. Well, what it means is that the party telling you that is the real threat to democracy. Because after all, democracy is about giving the citizens multiple choice. And in the case of a two-party system, two clear alternatives. So one party doesn't get to sort of cancel out the legitimacy of the other party at the outset by saying, we're for democracy and they're not. No, democracy itself means people are freely choosing between the two parties. Now, let's turn to Martin Luther King. Because we're living at a time when King is praised and perhaps even overpraised. King was a flawed man. He had all kinds of personal problems. He was discovered to have been a plagiarist in his academic work that is now well established. He was also kind of a serial philanderer. David Garrow, the historian, has documented all this ad nauseum. And Garrow has even gone further and documented even more troubling things in King's past. But I think this is kind of a way of showing that we need to have a certain degree of historical latitude toward people, not to expect a kind of personal perfection. I say this because the left is very tolerant toward King. In fact, they do their best to kind of conceal King's flaws. But at the same time, if the flaws belong to Jefferson or Lincoln or Franklin, they're magnified, they're italicized, their statues have to come down, they can't be honored anymore. Look, they acted inconsistently with their principles. And evidently with Martin Luther King, this discussion is not even really raised. But I do think that King was a flawed man who nevertheless was championed a good cause. Now, what was the good cause? It was really a battle for equal rights under the law. And it was a battle against segregation. Now, the battle for equal rights under the law would not have been necessary if the 14th Amendment, which was passed almost a century earlier by the Republicans, had been enforced. But what happened in the Democratic South, the South controlled by the Democratic Party, is that the 13th Amendment ended slavery, but the 14th and 15th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, equal rights under the law, the 15th Amendment, the right to vote, were basically shoved aside. They were rendered meaningless in many ways. And so the civil rights battle of the 20th century, led by Martin Luther King, can be understood as nothing more than restoring the Republican principles of the 14th and 15th Amendment, which had been desecrated by the Democratic Party. Now, when we come back, I want to talk about why King's job in achieving this goal turned out to be difficult in some respects, but also surprisingly easy in others.